Hey guys, how's it going? This is Braxton. We're just going to be talking about homeostasis today. If I could even spell it. Okay, homeostasis. So homeostasis is basically the ability of the body to maintain a relatively stable internal environment, regardless of changes in the external environment. This internal environment that we're referring to is the fluid that surrounds the cells. So let's just say this is cell and this is the fluid. And maintaining this internal environment is crucial for proper cellular function. One example of how it might work in the body is with body temperature regulation. With homeostasis, there's typically a set point. Let's just say right here. This is a set point that the body needs to be at for proper cellular function. That's just when everything's working at its best ability, right? But at times, let's just say with body temp. So body temp was 98.6, that's set point, degrees Fahrenheit, not Celsius, we would be dead. Right there, okay. Like this, okay. And then we have time here. So we have this set point, but obviously external environment, it's hot outside, right? There's gonna be always different changes that are gonna be affecting us on our internal environment. So we won't always be stuck at this set point. So there might be some deviations, kind of in this little bit of a range right here, but it's always gonna be kind of hanging around the set point. Typically, the bigger the range that our body allows us to go from that set point means the less important it really is. But the tighter that range, it's like, oh, this is like super important. We need to keep it at this set point if we're gonna survive. Cool, so our body is able to do homeostasis with a lot of communication. And it communicates through something called a reflex control pathway. Kind of a general kind of structure of a reflex control pathway is first there's a stimulus. Something that changes in our environment. So let's just deal with like body temp regulation, right? Just kind of like just to kind of help it make sense a little bit. So we have our temperature. Either it got really hot or really cold outside. And it's affecting our internal, what the heck was that? Our internal body temp, right? Perfect. So first you have a stimulus, and that's picked up by a receptor. So like on your skin, you're detecting that change, right? These receptors send that signal through an afferent pathway. Either through the blood or through the neurons. I like to think of afferent pathway as arriving with the A to the control center. That's where these receptors send their signal to. Control centers, a lot of people think it's just typically the brain is the control center. It's one of our main ones, but we have quite a few throughout the body. And at the control center, that's where they know what that set point is for different things in our body, like body temp, blood pH, you name it. Those control centers know it. And they'll interpret what really the body wants to do, what we want to do to get back to that set point so we don't deviate too far. So they'll send a signal, again, through the blood or the neurons. It's like the endocrine system or the nervous system, through the efferent pathway. Perfect. So they'll send that signal down to its effectors. These are kind of the guys that are going to get the job done, the effectors. So like your muscles, your organs, whatever you name it, they're going to cause that change in that variable, basically to bring it back to that set point or whatever the body's wanting to do. And then you'll get the receptors picking up on that signal again, and it's just a constant loop. It's always just kind of happening, just to make sure we're staying in homeostasis so we can survive. There are a couple pathways that we use with this idea of a reflex control system. First one, and most common and one of the more important, well, they're both important, but most common is your negative feedback loop. Write it right here. Just negative feedback. So with negative feedback, it is basically, it counteracts the change in a variable from the external environment to bring the body back towards its set point. So like, there's a lot of examples of this in the body. There's regulation of the pH in the blood, replenishment of oxygen by the lungs, body temperature regulation. And we'll just stay with this theme of body temperature regulation. So let's just say, okay, right here. It's really hot or cold outside. So the mechanoreceptors, or not the kind of the sensory neurons or thermoreceptors in the skin detect this change in the temperature. So there's that stimulus, which is hot or cold. Okay. Our thermoreceptors pick up on that signal. They send that signal through the neurons or the blood, the sensory neurons, about the temperature through the efferent pathway to the control center. In this case, it'll be the hypothalamus. And it'll be like, okay, we should be at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, not percent, Fahrenheit. But we're either getting a little too high from that or we're getting a little too low from that. So let's fix that. So they'll send a signal through the efferent pathway. Efferent pathway to the effectors. And there's quite a few different effectors that you can use. I can't spell that. Through to help with this change in body temp. So it sent the signal through the neurons or the blood. And some of these effectors that can help with body temperature regulation could be like your sweat glands. So let's just say sweat glands, which will start to sweat. It'll receive the signal from the hypothalamus, begin to sweat, and the sweat evaporates and cools the body down. It transfers that heat to that sweat, which will leave our body. We also have our blood vessels, which can do quite a couple different things. So if it's too hot, let's just say it's too hot, then they will vasodilate, which is a fancy word that I just learned. That means that the veins or your blood vessels will dilate or get bigger, basically, to allow more blood flow to go to the skin. And this will allow that heat to be transferred to the external environment. If it's more cold, then they will vasoconstrict, which will pretty much just make it so that, the veins, blood vessels, arteries, right, they will constrict and keep that blood from going to the surface, like around the skin, so that heat can be kept within the body if it's getting really cold out, right? We don't want to lose that heat. There's also signals that the skeletal muscles can receive. And these signals will cause them to shiver. It's causing them to contract, and it's like, you're shaking, right? Your muscles are contracting, and it's heating your body up. So that's basically what an example would be for negative feedback. If you're getting too hot, they'll do the opposite and try to cool you down. If you're getting too cold, from the set point 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, it'll do the opposite of whatever's happening and increase the temp to get back to that set point. Perfect. We also have positive feedback. So when negative feedback isn't working adequately, positive feedback will jump in. Typically means that something's broken, something's not working, it's not good. So typically, positive feedback is unintentional. But about 5% of the time, very low amount of the time, it is actually intentional. We want to do that. And a couple of these cases are with childbirth and blood clotting. So for positive feedback, it's basically the response to the stimulus that we're doing is increasing the deviation from the set point. So instead of negative feedback where you're leaving that set point but you're going back to it, you're trying to always return to it, Positive feedback would be just continuing to leave further deviations from that set point. Okay. Let's talk about childbirth. This is a good example of positive feedback. So I'm going to draw a little picture here. So we have a little baby, or sometimes a big baby, that will be in the uterus. So this circle right here is the uterus. I'm going to write baby. Perfect. And then we have the cervix, like right there. So what's happening is that as the baby's starting to grow, they'll begin to push out on the uterus. And there'll be these stretch receptors in the uterus and the cervix that will pick up on the stretch, especially in the cervix here. This will send a signal through the afferent pathway to the control center, which would be the brain. And it's like, holy cow, this baby's growing. We're stretching. What do we do? Well, the brain's like, oh, that's good. We want to get rid of that baby, like have it be born. So we're going to release through the efferent pathway, or the exiting pathway, right? That's how I like to think of it. We're going to release oxytocin. And oxytocin is known to increase the contractions, which will create further stretching and pressure and stimulus on that cervix. So this will just keep exciting that whole thing. It'll just keep going back and forth till that baby's out. So this is basically what happens with positive feedback. It sends that signal through the afferent pathway to the brain, and because there's stretching on the cervix, so it'll go through the blood and neurons. And then the brain, or the control center in this case, will release oxytocin through the efferent pathway, through the bloodstream, and that will go back to the uterus to increase the contractions. So today, just a little recap. We talked about the definition of homeostasis and how it might work in the body. We also talked about the reflex control system, right here, the components of it in each one. And then we also talked about negative feedback, as well as a couple of examples, such as regulation of pH in blood, thermoregulation in the body, and then we talked about positive feedback as well. Perfect. This is just part A of essay exam 1.